Right, good morning, welcome back. Now, on this channel, we often wonder whether some of the more simple videos that we decide we might make are maybe teaching you how to suck eggs, maybe a bit obvious, you know, they all know how to do that, don't they? But consistently, we find in the comments, when we post up real basic elementary stuff that we would have thought everybody knew, we get loads of comments saying, thanks for that, I never knew, and now I do. So, today, Yamaha XJR 1300 air filter replacement. Now, unlike Harley Davidsons, whose air filters are so obvious they're practically a trip hazard, Japanese bikes tend to bury their air filters deep in the heart of the bike. And the XJR 1300 is no different. It's buried about here, about that far down, kind of next to the battery, and completely invisible. Now, as with every other job I've done so far on this project, you need to take loads of stuff off. And this bike is still currently part stripped because it did the valve clearances, the choke and throttle cables, the spark plugs, and took the carbs out and whatnot. And that's why I haven't put it all back together yet. But if your bike's just come in to have just an air filter changed, if that's all you want to do, you don't have to take any of this off. Just 2 items to start working on removing it. Firstly, the seat, because just about every job starts with taking the seat off. And then the only other item you have to remove to get access is the right-hand side panel, and that's 1 Allen key and pull it off. Now, because I'm demonstrating this, and also because it's already disconnected, I'm going to lift the battery out of the way so you get a clear view of what's going on. But if you're doing it yourself, you absolutely don't need to lift the battery out. Not necessary. Right, let's move all this spaghetti out of the way. Now, this is a pad, a soft foam pad glued to the back of the airbox here to cushion the battery and hold it in place. And this is the back of the airbox, and the air filter lives right behind here in that section of the box. And the airbox is given a side door, and this is it. This panel on the side of the airbox literally unscrews and comes off to access the filter itself. Right, let's just take this out of the way. That's just a battery charging pigtail. Get a clear view of everything right there. Right, screwdrivers. Before we do this, in a previous video we spoke about screwdrivers, JIS screwdrivers for Japanese bikes. I think we all know that, so let's not go there. But what I wanted to talk about, and I did mention in the previous video, was using the right size screwdriver, not just the right type. This bike's 22 years old. How many air filters has it had in 40,000 miles? It should have had 8 or 9. So ultimately, those screws have been in and out that many times. So are they going to be the same shape they were 22 years ago? No, they're not. That's even if they're the same screws. They might have been screws from something else. With old bikes, you have to have a little bit of a sense of humour. Don't just use the right type screwdriver, which we all know we should use. Make sure you use the right size, because in most cases, that's far more important. Phillips screwdrivers, just like Posi screwdrivers, they come in 3 main sizes for vehicles. Number 1, number 2, and the big number 3, which you've hardly ever used. So this is a number 2. Grab them both, poke one in the screw, and see what it feels like. Is that going in all the way? No. This number 2, JIS, is going in that screw. It seems like it just feels like it's just hitting the top of the screw. It's not going all the way down in. Try the number 1 instead. That goes all the way to the bottom. You can feel it, it's satisfying. It goes in, it gets a good grip on the screw, and it's going to undo it. Use the right size screwdriver, and it'll undo it, not chew it. Now, these 3 screws are the most obvious ones that are going to present themselves. Now, you don't actually need to remove those screws in order to get the air filter out, but we're going to take them off to show you what this is. This is the snorkel that prevents any debris getting sucked into the air filter and helps it breathe as designed. Now, with the snorkel removed, again, you don't have to take that off, but it gives you much easier access to the 2 screws at the bottom. So you take those out, the 2 screws at the top, Then you can pull this outside cover plate off and then pull the filter out. Just give myself a bit more room. Let's move this wire in. Enough. And there it is. Ah. Well, there we are. Don't you love that? The previous mechanic has had the presence of mind, just like I did with the clutch and like I do on filters all the time, to write the mileage and the date that this was fitted in the bike. It was fitted in June 2021. It's now 2025, and that 34,351 miles. This bike's now done 40,800 miles. So there we are, 6,500 miles that air filter has done. And I know that for sure because there's the mileage written on it. Now the date on this filter, well, it's largely irrelevant. It doesn't really bear anything, but the mileage certainly does. 6,500 miles is quite a long way, and that would have dragged in an awful lot of microscopic particles and got trapped in the filter along the way. But as it gets blocked up over 6,500 miles, it starts to get restricted, and it restricts airflow. And it's bad enough on a bike with a 40mm air inlet. That is the only air inlet, that 40mm hole for a 1.3 litre engine. That's all it's breathing through, that. So it's incredibly important that the filter itself doesn't become a secondary restriction. Because if it does, with carburetors that are not really self-adjusting like fuel injection with an ECU, they are a fixed menu. The fuel they deliver is the fuel they deliver. So if you cut off the airflow due to a bunged up air filter, you're going to get more fuel flow. So you richen the mixture. You start to get, your spark plugs start going black and sooty, and you start getting lower fuel consumption and obviously lower power. And that's all bad for every part of the engine, because you start to carbonize the inside of the engine, and that affects it long term. So seriously, a bunged up air filter is a big issue, and increasingly I find air filters being neglected all the time, especially the washable ones, because people just don't bother to wash them. They think that a K&N filter is fit for life. And that brings me to the next point. I've advocated many times in the past, in previous videos, to use a washable K&N DNA type air filter instead of these throwaway ones that the factory fits. The reasoning being that you're chucking these into landfill every 5,000 or 6,000 miles. That can't be brilliant for the environment long term, but I'm going to put this into recycling. It's mostly plastic, and I think that will recycle, so I'm going to do a little bit towards the environment on that. And of course, this bike has a budget. Sometimes your budget dictates your choices, and one of these is £11, is what I paid for the new one, and you'll pay maybe 5 or 6 times that for a K&N. So you have to make a decision based on what you can afford sometimes, and not just your radical conscience. Now, just before we chuck the new one in the bike, I want to show you this. We look at air filters sometimes, and we have a look in there when we're doing a service and we're trying to live on a budget, and we think, oh, you know, that will last another service, that's not too bad. There might be a few hockey noo-noos in there, but there's no dead badgers, there's no logs in there. I reckon that will be okay. Let's just have a look at the new one, and we'll see exactly how filthy that actually is. Oh my goodness, immediately you get the new one out. You can see that old one is absolutely honking. There's a few bits and pieces in there, as you can see, but the general look of the pleating is just black compared to the new one. Take a close look. Here's another little test. Just use light. So there, absolute and conclusive proof. If even light won't pass through it, then that means air certainly won't pass through it. So that bunged up filter is reducing airflow, increasing pollution, increasing fuel consumption, and reducing power. And why would you want any of that on your bike for the sake of £11? Just fit a new one. That's it. Now obviously this was a really basic procedure and you don't need a tutorial on how to fit an air filter when it's as easy as that. But I hope above all things it's proved something else which I do think was vitally important. And that is that dirty air filters creep up on you. They don't necessarily last 5,500, 6,500 miles. That might have got dirty in the first 1,000 miles. Imagine if you put your air filter in the winter and you ride every day in the filthy winter weather, that's going to get dirtier than it will in summer. Imagine if you live in a dusty area, then it's going to get dusty quicker. So check your air filter. If necessary, when you fit it, take a photograph of it, keep it on your phone. And if you check it later on, compare the photos. And if you see it getting dirty, remember what we've proved here today, which is that a dirty air filter doesn't just block airflow, it also increases fuel consumption and reduces power. And why would you want that? You're paying for that power delivery on your big 1300 engine, so why strangle it? So on this bike, that just leaves one more job on the servicing of the engine. That's going to be an oil and filter change. On this particular bike, the oil filter has been modified. Quite an interesting modification, and we'll cover that in the next video. So thanks for watching. Take it easy, ride safe. I'll see you next time.